Now, it's not often you hear the leader of a political party say he's stepping down because he's not that good at it. But when UKIP's leader, Lord Pearson, announced his resignation for that disarmingly good reason, it wasn't met with a barrage of disagreement. Well, now their former leader and long-time figurehead for the party, Nigel Farage, is back in the picture. He says he'll stand again after failing to gain a Westminster seat in the general election. UKIP has kicked off the party conference season. They're in Torbay this weekend, from where Mr Farage will join me in a moment. But first, some images from UKIP's last year.
We think that when it comes to the economy, it really is time for some straight talking. Frankly, we're skinned.
I get completely lost with the squillions and the billions and the trillions, and I imagine some of your viewers do as well.
You going to vote for me? Right, okay.
Have you read your manifesto?
Of course.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't seem very familiar with it.
I haven't remembered it all in detail.
The Speaker, John Bercow, comfortably saw off a challenge from some independents, and UKIP's Nigel Farage, who escaped serious injury in a plane crash yesterday.
Am I strong enough to take on a job which is 7 days a week, where you have to work hours that you simply couldn't believe?
Well, some of the images of the last few months. Nigel Farage joins me now from our Exeter studio. Thanks for joining us, Nigel Farage. Last month, as we saw, Lord Pearson admitted he wasn't great at party politics. No one's really disagreed with that, have they?
Listen, Lord Pearson's a wonderful man. He's been in the House of Lords since 1990. He's honest, he's straight, he's succeeded in many things in his life, in business, in charity, and in terms of UKIP. He was good at raising money, he was good at putting structures in place, he didn't enjoy the party politics game, and he had the guts to stand up and say it. And isn't that a refreshing change in politics today, where hardly anybody else ever admits they've got anything wrong at all?
So a fundraiser maybe rather than a leader. But, I mean, when you look back at that campaign, you know, a leader who said on air in an interview that he couldn't actually remember the policies very much, and, of course, the party failing to gain even one seat. Do you look back at that campaign and say, OK, hands up, it was a bit of a disaster?
Well, look, you know, we increased the number of votes we got by 50% on the previous general election. That was progress. We could have made more, but that's the past. And now what we're talking about is moving forward. You know, we're a party that does very well in proportional representation in European elections. We came second in 2009 across the entire UK. And now we face, next year, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish and English local elections. We've got a lot to do.
Sure, but, you know, the bit where you're really recognised is going to be in a general election. And if you look back, I mean, I guess in the spirit of candour, which your party's pretty good at the moment, you might say, you know what, Buckingham was the wrong seat to pick. I came third behind a...
Look, in life, you know, the easy option is to do nothing. I tend to take risks. Perhaps I take rather too many. I get some things right, I get some things wrong. That's fine. But I've decided today to throw my hat into the ring because I believe I've got the experience. I believe I'm able to deliver the kind of messages that UKIP voters want to hear. I've got the track record of raising money for the party in the past, and I'm going to try and have another go.
I don't know if there's a sort of Rip Van Winkle feeling here that, you know, last time you were leader of UKIP, the world was a very different place. Politics has changed now beyond all recognition. And there is that sense that sort of UKIP is still just looking at the same single issue. It's in danger of you know, being in the same pub with the same pipe, looking a bit old-fashioned, isn't it?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, your previous report about the crackpot idea that perhaps the European Union would impose a Tobin tax upon the City of London and cause financial mayhem and job losses for us just goes to prove the point that far from being a single issue, you know, there is no aspect of our national life that is not now affected directly by EU membership. Over 75% of our laws are made there. It really is the elephant in the room of British politics. We ought to talk about it, and above all, the British people ought to have a referendum about it. And that is not diminishing, it's growing.
The trouble is, though,
now,
but, you know, the Tories are arguing that line, or will be arguing that line in Brussels.
No, they're not.
And Labour's got a new leader. There is that sense that you've become slightly redundant, haven't you?
Look, The Tories promised a referendum and broke their promise. William Hague has now signed us up.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking about that referendum, but I'm talking about where you started, the Tobin tax and the position of, you know, Britain and the other European leaders. I mean, they're doing all that now. They're in power. They're in government.
They're in power. And since they came to power, they've signed us up to a European foreign policy, to a European external action service. They are not resisting anything at all. And if you're a Eurosceptic, the Conservative Party has now ceased to exist. And in terms of UKIP, and I agree with you, politics has changed very much since, you know, 4.5 years ago when I first became leader of UKIP. There are now 3 social democrat parties in Britain. The vacuum that exists in British politics is enormous, and what we have to do as a party is we have to professionalise, we have to get better people, we have to raise the money, and if we do that, we'll surprise you.
Forgive me, you've called it a vacuum, but you've also said that you're in favour of proportional representation. What we've got here is that classic, if you like, solution. They've got their coalition. Are you in favour of that?
I don't... Listen, it is becoming increasingly irrelevant who gets the keys to the door to number 10, because whilst they have the position, in reality, they don't have the power. We've given that away. And that is something that people are waking up to and are understanding, and it's why we will fight and fight and fight in local elections, in general elections, until the British people are given a free and a fair referendum so that they can decide their own future.
And is it increasingly irrelevant who wins the Labour leadership next month?
Yeah, because, you know, the Labour Party will choose somebody who is virtually indistinguishable in terms of background and policy from Clegg and Cameron.
So who would be your biggest fear?
Frankly, the biggest fear I've got is UKIP itself. We have got to transform this party and make it relevant to domestic elections. I recognise that's going to be a big challenge. I recognise we've got a lot to do. If the party chooses me again to be its leader, I'll do my best to make it happen.
Nigel Farage, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.